Steve Cooper, Rank Success, and this is another short video to support your aspirations to achieve promotion to Sergeant, Inspector and Chief Inspector. And this video today I've called the hierarchy of protection. You're probably thinking, what's he thinking about again? What's Steve talking about again? So the hierarchy of protection, how does this relate to promotion preparation? Well, it's just one of the ways in which I ask candidates or encourage candidates to think through as a means of prioritising thinking. So particularly depending where you are along the old development scale, everybody's different, everybody's got different experiences, different learning needs, and so we experiment with different ways to think, and the NDM clearly is one way to think particularly in terms of making decisions and to justify making decisions, so we'll talk about that. But I also encourage, just as I overlay over promotion applications, lots of different lenses, if you like, lots of different considerations to make sure that they're populated with the right things. So it's not just a quick attempt before a deadline to submit an application. It's an application that is considered, detailed, refined and distilled, and it reflects the amount of effort and time and work that's gone into it, so justifiably it should go through. So we often talk about different kind of lenses to think through, and I'll be doing some more videos on those, but this one's called the hierarchy of protection. So all it is really is when I say to people, if you're at a critical incident and you're a newly promoted inspector, so we're talking about a sergeant or a constable, and the scenario is you've arrived at a critical incident, what's the high level priorities? What are some of the higher level things that you're thinking about that shape your behaviour, that define your responsibilities, and that you're actually thinking about at a higher level? And initially, understandably, people say, well, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Do you mean like the protection of life? Bingo, there's the first one. Protection. Sometimes it's right under your nose. It's something you do every day. It's the primary duty of police officers to protect life. So Article 2, the protection of life is the first in the hierarchy of protection. So in case you weren't thinking about that at a critical incident, as a newly promoted sergeant, as an inspector or as a duty officer, that's always the first thing you're thinking about. So in the hierarchy of protection of life will govern what you do and your behaviours and how you do it and why you do it. So just understanding that as the first part of the hierarchy of protection. Now there are some other points that I'm going to go through, and I'll say, well, what do you think the next priority, what else are you protecting as you arrive as a sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, critical incident commander? What else are you protecting? And that is the reputation of your force and the wider police service. So again, at a higher level, in terms of what you're protecting, and just as a lens for thinking, you're protecting life and you're protecting the reputation of your force, how you behave, how your officers and staff behave. This is something that you're thinking through and starting to think through in slow time, and to think, okay, at incidents, yes I am, but I hadn't thought about that straight away. I thought about stage 1 of the NDM, gathering information and verifying and analysing and assessing it. Now you might say, well yeah, that includes clearly and obviously the protection of life, or does it? Because it has to. So again, applying some of these lenses and filters over how people prepare and how they think as they're preparing, you can overlay the hierarchy of protection over the NDM and vice versa, just to ensure that you're able to focus on, and particularly when we're talking about this now, so if somebody says to you, tell me what you're thinking about when you're making your decisions, or how do you make your decisions, or how do you make effective decisions, this is the kind of thing that helps you flesh out and talk and think about what you're actually doing. So the hierarchy of protection is a way of getting you to do that. So I'll say, well, what else are you protecting? If you're protecting life and you're protecting the reputation of your force and wider police service, what else are you protecting that's quite closely linked to that? And ultimately, we may go through what an individual might be thinking, but the actual aspect of that I'm after is the reputation of the criminal justice system, the wider criminal justice system. Why? Well, it's so closely wedded to the reputation of the force and wider policing, that how you behave, when people come into custody, when people are charged, when people are taken into custody, and other ways in which they come into contact with policing and the wider staff within policing, you are collectively, jointly, and through process and policy and behaviours, you are protecting and supporting the reputation of the wider criminal justice system. So again, it's just thinking about that's actually what you're doing when you're doing all your other things. And what else do you think you should be protecting is another question I might ask. And the wider public. So we've already talked about life at the beginning, yeah, obviously. So what about the wider public? How do you actually build that in? So we're talking about, well, maybe stage 2 of the NDM, identifying risks and alleviating them, mitigating them. How are you doing that? Working through threats and risks. So that's how you're doing it, but actually you're looking to protect the wider public. So it's not just life, you're doing that as well, but you're looking to protect the wider public in everything that you're doing and identifying and managing the operational threats and risks. So that's what an inspector does as part of the role. So again, what we're trying to do is just weave some of these things together, and it's two ways of thinking. You can overlap them together, but understanding it as the hierarchy of protection is a good way to think about it. And last but by no means least, police officers and staff. So, everything you do is also geared around supporting and protecting police officers and staff who are involved in operational activity and your decision making and the management of resources. So, particularly around the wider public and police officers and staff, public confidence is very closely linked to that. That's the name of the game, maintaining and supporting public confidence, and the model of policing by consent, and aspects around legitimacy of policing. So stepping back around this thinking, using a hierarchy of protection to think about as a higher level thinking model, is just one way of helping you think about your leadership. Slowing time down. I'll often talk, and you'll hear me in my videos talk about time travel, if you like, in terms of shooting forward, what's happening in the future of policing, in 10 years, 15, 20 years, what's happening in 5 or 10 years, and what's happening today, and how you're going to get there. So again, all of these issues overlap, but the hierarchy of protection is just one of those lenses, one of those tools that I use to encourage conversation, if you like, and to tease out, to draw out some of the awareness or lack of awareness, as it turns out, from time to time of candidates as they're preparing for promotion. So again, as I said, you can overlay that over the NDM, and all of it helps you to kind of think through in slow time and push that pause button for thinking and give yourself that thinking time to talk about, when you're making your decisions and you arrive at the point where you've taken action, stage 5 of the NDM, and it's in line with the code of ethics. So you're happy you've made a decision that is aligned to and shares the values, your own values and those of the code of ethics, and you're able then to justify your decision, and you have a rationale, and part of that rationale can be supported by the hierarchy of protection and thinking about that. And one of the other ways of thinking about that is literally, forget about everything you've ever known about policing. I'm now going to program you as a policing robot to go out. There's nothing else in your brain, so I'm just going to program you with those. You will protect life. You will protect the reputation, the force, and the wider policing service. You will protect the wider criminal justice system in everything you do. You will also protect the wider public, and you will protect police officers and staff. And that's it. Send you out on the streets with that in your head. Of course, it's just a higher level thinking tool or exercise, but it supplements and complements promotion preparation and just gives you some other aspects to think through when you're starting to think through your evidence, your examples ahead of a board. Now, clearly, if you want to find all this in one place, you can download a digital toolkit from my site. There's a 4-hour masterclass. There's a there's a 20% discount code, RS Guides 20, which you can use to get 20% off any of the guides or bundles. But essentially, these are the kind of things that I'm starting to share on these videos that help people, that support people in terms of preparing for promotion effectively, and to use your time, which is precious, to the best of your ability. Okay, well, I will be back with some other videos shortly, so thank you for listening to me again, and I'll see you soon.